In this video, you're going to get introduced to block scoping in ES6. So in ES6, they introduced something called block scoping. So let's explore it. So let's create or declare a variable y and set it to 2. And then let's create a couple of code blocks. So a code block or a block is any code that you place inside curly braces like this. So you're going to have 2. And let's write some code inside the first one. So I'm going to declare a variable x and set it to 1. Now, in the second block, I'm going to log x. And if I save, then I get x is not defined. And the reason why is because blocks in ES6, they are separate when it comes to scope. So when you declare variables using let, the scope of this block and of that block are completely separate. So you get an error if you try to access x inside this block, because that block cannot communicate with that one. Now, if you use var instead, you wouldn't get an error because variables declared using var are not block scoped. But let, or variables declared using let, they are actually block scoped. So you get an error there. Now let's declare another variable z and set it to 2 in the first block. Now if you log z, you get 2 because z is in the same block and you have access to the value of z if you log it right there. So that's not a problem. Now if you declare z again right there, do you think you're going to have an error because you're basically redeclaring z? Well, if I save, I wouldn't get any error because these two variables, they are in two separate blocks. So redeclaration is not going to cause any problems. And if you log z in this one, you're going to get 4 because you're accessing the value of z in the same block. All right, so again, no redeclaration error because variables are in different scopes. All right, so now if you log y, do you think you're going to get an error because we are inside a block and there is no y variable inside the block, but there is a y variable in the global scope? So let's find out. We get 2 because a block has got access to the global environment or its outer environment. In our case, we have access to y, which is equal to 2, so there is no problem logging y inside the block. All right, so this is a quick introduction to block scoping in ES6, and it's very important because it's going to have many consequences when it comes to for loops and many other pieces of code where you're going to find blocks. So it's very important to master block scoping in ES6. So a quick reminder about ES5 fake scoping, which we did using immediately invoked function expressions. So let's call it fake scoping. So instead of blocks, we used to place these two pieces of code inside immediately invoked function expressions like this. And they were completely separate. Creating two different scopes. Alright, so let's comment this. Alright, now let's play with some code where you would find blocks and see how block scoping is going to affect our results. So for example, let's declare a variable mark and set it to 80. And let's say that we're going to have a condition. So if mark is greater than 50, then we're gonna pass. So we're gonna set a variable pass to true. Otherwise, we're gonna set pass to false. So now if you log pass, what do you think is going to happen? Are you going to get an error, or are you going to get true because mark is greater than 50? Well, let's find out. You get an error. It's saying pass is not defined because pass can be found inside two separate blocks, and we're calling pass in the global scope. So the global scope does not have access to pass inside these blocks. So to fix this, we're going to need to change the structure of our code. We're going to need to declare pass in the global scope. And then, instead of declaring pass inside the scope, or these blocks, we're going to set its value to true or false. So now when you call pass right there, you have access to the value of pass because you have declared it inside the global scope. So let's try this time, and you get true. And this time you get false. Okay. In the next video, you're going to see how functions are going to be affected with block scoping in ES6.